Welcome to In All Honesty, the podcast where we talk about the impact of inflammatory neuropathies like Guillain-Barré syndrome, CIDP, MMN and other related conditions. I'm Rich Collins, the Chief Executive of Inflammatory Neuropathies UK, the only UK charity that solely supports people impacted by these life-changing conditions. On each episode of this podcast, I'll be joined by someone who has something to say about inflammatory neuropathies. We will have some very honest chats, and I'm sure there's going to be some tears, mainly from me, along with some laughs. If you want to know more about what Inflammatory Neuropathies UK do, then head over to www.inflammatoryneuropathies.uk. Hello everyone, it's Rich here, your host for In All Honesty, the podcast from Inflammatory Neuropathies UK. And I mean, this is a proper treat for me and hopefully for everyone else. I am joined today by someone I consider to be a bit of a hero. I'm joined by David McIntosh. Now, David is a plasma advocate of the highest order. He's, I think, and many people have said, is the guy who's responsible for the fact that we have UK plasma back being made into IVIg and other products. And we're going to talk all about plasma and kind of David's journey with it. So David, welcome. Lovely to have you on here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honour.
David, come on then. This is your chance to tell us all about who you are and what's your background.
Well, who I am and what my background is probably the least important part of this podcast. I'm David McIntosh. I've been doing one thing and another in the commercial and public worlds for the last 60 years, funnily enough. I was working it out. I'm 79 years old. I worked in the NHS for 10 years back in the last century. And the last job I did in the NHS was to run the blood transfusion service in Scotland. And in those days, plasma was a central issue in our lives. The recovered plasma from whole blood was the reason we got up in the morning. The red cells were a useful byproduct. Yes, people got them when they had road accidents. People got them in surgery. Red cells are important. We all know about hemoglobin and oxygen carrying and so forth. But really, the reason we got up in the morning was plasma, because hemophiliacs needed factor VIII. And factor VIII was in short supply. And that was the one thing that drove us strategically. In those days, immunoglobulin was a very useful byproduct, but it came out in small quantities and it wasn't used very much in those days. I'm talking about the 1990s. Now, I've been away doing other things in the meantime, which are irrelevant, but I got back into all of this when I was asked to be a witness at the infected blood inquiry. And I mean, I know it's going to sound stupid, but I was not connected with the NHS in those 23 years. And I was horrified to discover when I came back to it that plasma had been thrown away for most of that time because they were all afraid of mad cows. And I thought, oh dear, well, I suppose that's probably a good reason for that. It took me 6 months, very careful examination of the facts and consultation with experts before I realized that, well, no, there wasn't a good reason for that. It was high time to stop it. And I started campaigning. One of the things that got in my way was the fact that in those days, the MHRA, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, the British regulator, was part and parcel of the European Medicines Agency. They shared the same premises. Because remember, long ago, this is the days before Brexit, you see. Yes, you and I are both that old, aren't we? There may be viewers who don't remember about Brexit. But when Brexit happened, things changed. But in the meantime, I asked the MHRA, I said, the Europeans are banning British plasma as being dangerous. You're not allowed to use it. The fractionators in Europe were not allowed to accept it through the door. What are we in Britain doing about it, said I. Oh, we're nothing. No. We were parties to that decision. We co-wrote the guidelines. And I said, but the guidelines are way out of date and they're inaccurate and wrong. And surely somebody should say something. Well, to cut a long story short, nobody in the UK said a dicky bird, except the organization that I set up with friends called United Plasma Action. And United Plasma Action was dedicated to stopping this nonsense, getting British donors' plasma back into the pharmaceutical pipeline and making the medicines that are so desperately needed. And of course, nowadays, the driving medicine is no longer factor VIII. That's moved on scientifically. And thank goodness, there are all sorts of better ways of doing it. But immunoglobulin is still absolutely vital. And it's enormously complex. So If anyone expects some chemical equivalent to come along, yes, it will happen. It won't happen in my lifetime, and probably not in yours, Rich. It may be 50 years or so before we begin to get a grip on that. In the meantime, immunoglobulin is in desperately short supply globally. I don't know how many of your listeners and viewers would know that 80% of the people in the world, the patients and the undiagnosed sufferers, 80% of them, 80 out of every 100, get nothing.
Mm.
You know, they're not a bit short. They didn't miss a dose. They just get nothing. Most of them haven't even been diagnosed, let alone treated. So there is a global shortage of immunoglobulin. And now that we've managed to help the British to get their act right, we've moved on. We're not really doing very much in the UK anymore. We're working on what is now known as LMIC, low and middle income countries. So that's my little journey. I've now set up this thing called United Plasma Action with a small group of like-minded friends. You know, it's not a company. It's more of a kind of movement, if you like. We do it all for nothing. None of us get paid for anything. None of us get our expenses. We don't go to expensive conferences and talk about it. We just quietly try and get on and help people do it. And that's really what it's all about now.
And I think this is one of the exciting things. This is why I absolutely adore David. I think you're such a fantastic man. We first met in, it was I can't remember where, it was somewhere in London at a conference around from NHS blood and transfusion. They were looking at I forget what it was, and you were kind of in the audience along with me, and I must say I was fairly new into the organisation, and I knew absolutely nothing about plasma at all. So I was going along to this to learn really, and to try and pick up, because obviously lots and lots of people within our community have either had their life saved by IVIg if they've had something like Guillain-Barré syndrome, or they're reliant on it as part of their ongoing treatment for those who can tolerate it and those it works for. And I was there just to learn. And then in this audience was this chap, and he stood up and he was talking such truth to power that it was unbelievable. And I thought, who's this man? I must have a chat. And I kind of bullied my way through the people at lunchtime and kind of sat on your shoulder and just listened. And we ended up having a good chat, and we've spoken a lot since then at various things that we turn up at, and there we are, both at the same thing. And also through LinkedIn and things, because we've got, I think we're both pretty passionate about this. You know, you've got so much more experience than I have in this, but it's incredible, and I adore your passion for this and what you've achieved. I think it's incredible, and that's why I was so desperate to get you on it. So come on then. United Plasma Action, you've given us where you got to with it. It began as United Kingdom Plasma Action, and like you say, it's now kind of evolved into United Plasma Action. What's your actual role there?
Oh, that's a very good question. You know, takes me back to my industrial days. What's your job description? What are your key performance indicators? Well, I'm the founder and chairman, and I mean, I think in a lot of charities I would probably be called the director. The reason I prefer the title of chairman is because chairmen are there to inject a certain amount of calm and balance and wisdom. They're not there to boss people about. Yeah. I mean, I've been a director, I've been a chief executive, I've done that. I don't want to do that anymore, thank you. I want to try and help people coordinate their thoughts in a positive direction. And, you know, I've been doing this between the two organizations. I've been doing this now for 6 years. And the thing that I have found most singularly interesting is the number of people globally who say to me, "Oh, we love what you say, David. We can't say it. We think it, but we can't say it." And I find myself being the mouthpiece. And, you know, for people who are worried about postpartum hemorrhage in Kenya, people in India who are, you know, desperate for immunoglobulin. These are people who know what they need, but they somehow can't enunciate the need and what to do next. But my role is to try and support people who want change in this situation. Somebody wrote to me, I'm dealing with an economist now to try and make an economic case better for this. And he said, a system that isn't working looks ripe for change. You know, were we taught at school, you and I, that the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again, hoping it will get better next time. And if you look at the history of European plasma, and the publicity around European plasma, the effort that goes into telling the world how wonderful plasma medicines are. And nobody ever mentions, but oh, by the way, we don't actually make enough of our own. We can't get enough plasma. We import it from America. The only thing they say about America is those evil people, you know, they're paying their donors. Isn't that dreadful? Well, frankly, if you're interested in development economics and you think about what it would do to those 1.4 billion Indian citizens, if some of them could just get paid a little bit for giving plasma, it would revitalize the economy. It would save literally millions of lives. You know, I mean, when you've got 80% of those sufferers of Guillain-Barré or whatever it happens to be, whether it's neurological or immunological, 80% of them are getting nothing. So, and yet there is a kind of high priesthood, a sort of religion. They have cathedrals to it. Altruistic, unpaid donation. It's a wonderful thing. It would be a wonderful thing if it wasn't letting patients die, you know, and people get cross with me. They say, oh, that's very rude. Die? You just try watching your children do it, and then you'll know how rude it is. I mean, it's absurd. We're in an age of deference, politeness, and patience. I'm fed up with all three of them.
And I think that this is the reality of it, isn't it? Is that, you know, we've built a system that is built around folk being good enough to go to their village hall or to a donation centre. You know, in England there's 3 donation centres where you can give plasma. You know, so if I from where I am, if I could, I can't give. I'm not allowed to because of my MS. I can't donate. But if I was to be able to, I'd have to go all the way to Birmingham to give plasma. Now I'm not going to do that because that's miles away, isn't it? And what a waste of my time and effort and everything else. All for a great thing. But actually, if someone said, well, you know, we'll make it worth your while, half the population of Birmingham might well turn up and go, well, I would do it.
Yeah, two interjections there, if I may. First of all, please don't ever let a whole blood donor think that they're not giving plasma. You know, 53% of your blood donation is plasma, and about 25%, and this is important, only about 25% or less of the immunoglobulin requirement can be met through recovered plasma. So blood donors are vital, both for blood and plasma, but we need a hell of a lot more from pheresis. Now, if you weren't taking a train to Birmingham, you were walking 5 miles through the desert, probably in your bare feet, then you would know what it was like to be an unpaid donor. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And when I tell you that we need 4 times as much plasma as we get from whole blood, and that needs millions of donors, you'll appreciate. To ask a population to give enough plasma is a big deal. You know, it's not just drop in once every 3 months and give a pint of blood and have a biscuit. It's sit there, you know, for half an hour, 45 minutes, draining away. And it's a tremendous gift. And the patients need it. It is not a kind of religious observance, you know, and if you get paid for it, it doesn't make you an evil, wicked person. Everyone else gets paid, the donor attendant, the guy who drove the van, everybody in the hospital. Why does the poor sodding donor be the one who doesn't get a penny? It's madness.
Isn't it? I mean, I was over in Vienna, in Austria, not long ago, and to see a whole system there, vein-to-vein system, and yes, everyone was getting paid there, and yes, you know what? Every bed was full in that donor centre.
Yes, well, Austria is one of the few countries in the world, there are 5, the USA, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Czechia, where they do collect enough plasma to meet the needs of their own patients.
But isn't it odd that America, the biggest one of those things, is where the vast majority of our plasma comes from that we're using for IVIg? Right. Which is paid for. So you know, we don't want to pay our own citizens to give their blood and plasma, but we'll pay someone else's to do it, which seems a bit odd to me. But hey, what do I know?
No, but you see, this is a good British comment, and Rich Collins is a polite man. You see, it seems rather odd to you. It is horrendous hypocrisy. It's complete nonsense, and I don't care, and I wouldn't mind, except that 2 things. 1, we are not actually getting enough Ig in Europe for patients anyway. But secondly, all that 40% of European demand that is met now out of the global total is sucking plasma out of the global total that could be used for other patients who need it. The Europeans are sitting there complacently twiddling their thumbs. Oh, you mustn't pay them. And we're sucking plasma out of a world that's short of it. It is actually, in moral, ethical terms, I think it's criminal. It's just criminal. They should not be preaching non-payment when non-payment is what's killing people.
I mean, well, it's the United Plasma Action Provider, a really great thing. I've seen you put it up lots of times. There's a great chart that explains how much per person, how many milligrams per person of plasma is being used, IG is being used in various countries, and as a comparison, and it is, absolutely shocking when you look at the world totals and do it. But we'll talk about the world in a bit, but even taking out of it and looking at the UK against some of our comparators, the States is using 4 times as much per person, I think it is, something like that.
Certainly 3 times as much.
Yeah. And I think France and Germany are using much more than we are per person. We're not a big user of IG products in the grand scheme.
We're the second. I think we're the second lowest user in Europe after Germany.
Yeah.
I mean, as you have done, I'm sure I've had many conversations with clinicians about this, and one of them actually implied that the Americans are just, they've got too many dollars and too much testosterone, and they use too much of everything. And he doesn't believe that 300 grams per thousand population is the right diagnostic level, or the right prescribing level. And I say to him, well, what do you think the right level might be? Would it be 290 or 187? Because in India they've got 3.6. So I don't actually want you to tell me your professional opinion about what the minimum should be. Let's just grab one that's 5 times bigger than they've got. And when we get there, then we'll talk about it.
I'm on record as saying that if it was me and I was getting IG and it was working, I'd want to stay on it forever. I'd want to keep it up forever, and I'd want to get that going, because if it's making me fit and well, and yes, some of my clinician colleagues will argue that you shouldn't be on it forever, because there are some, there's research that says side effects aren't the greatest for a long time. But we get to see people, who are on receiving IG treatment and then they're taken off, or it's scaled down. And I personally, if it was me, I wouldn't be very happy about it. And I can understand some of what the clinician's argument is around that, but we get a lot of people, so a lot of people in our community get really, really, really worried about saying anything, just in case the amount of their treatment is reduced, or it's taken away from them.
You've hit a very important point there, and I can't mention names because it would be difficult for them. But I spoke to a practice nurse about this a little while ago, because as you know, perhaps the viewers don't yet know, I'm a great advocate of demanding more immunoglobulin. The source of it coming from UK plasma is a benefit, and I'm very happy that we achieved that. But it has achieved nothing for patients until you get more. All it's done is save money for the Treasury, and very possibly give you a slightly more reliable supply. But until you get more, we haven't really done our job in UK Plasma Action. Now, the point you made earlier, Rich, absolutely right. Maybe there are side effects, maybe you shouldn't. As long as you're having a clinical conversation about what's best for the patient, that's fine. And attitudes and ideas will vary between clinicians. That's the whole point about clinical freedom and the experience and expertise of a clinician. But at the moment, an awful lot of conversation is about, oh, well, it's expensive, and we mustn't waste it, and other people need it too, These are irrelevant nonsense. They're what I call plausible platitudes. Like, oh, yes, we take these things very seriously. Oh, do you? Just prove it then. A quick point about IVIg. I mean, obviously, you'll be more aware of this than I am, but there is subcutaneous and there is intramuscular. I mean, let's not forget, immunoglobulin has many, many, many applications across a range of diseases. And when I hear people say, Oh, but people overprescribe it, you know. I don't I don't mind that in a medical symposium, but when it's about supply, this general blanket notion, oh, they'll probably waste it, don't give them any. This is the beginning of the end. We've got to stop people talking like that. Have you got at least 200 grams per thousand population? Good. Put it in the pharmacy.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about who gets what. And hopefully, at the end of the year, there'll be quite a lot of it that's gone out of date because that's the only way to prove you've got enough. You know, it's like
Yeah.
when I was a boy, my mother always taught me to leave a little food on the plate to make your host understand that you had had enough. If you know, because if you empty your plate in an Arab country, they'll fill it again because you're
See,
still hungry.
I was always brought up to clear my plate completely. There we go. The very
Well,
differences
you, well, there you go. Well, don't do that in Egypt, or they'll fill it up again because they'll assume you're still hungry.
So in terms of we've talked quite a lot there about UK plasma and obviously what a lot of what you're doing is linked to around the world, and we've touched on the fact that there's lots of places where there aren't anywhere near adequate amounts of it. So what do you think are the biggest issues around plasma around the world at the minute? What you're dealing with this every day? What are the issues out there?
I think about this a lot, Rich. My fundamental point is it's a matter of willpower. We're not talking about we need to reinvent something, or it's not like cancer where we really, really need a lot more research. Okay, we know exactly what to do. Now, it may get better in 100 years' time, but at the moment, we know there are patients who are being very well cared for with extremely well proven techniques. So the world is not short of immunoglobulin because most of them don't know how to make it or anything like that. We know how to make it. We know how to collect plasma. So the problem is willpower. Now, any country whose cabinet ministers drive around in expensive cars have got enough money to do the necessary. It's not that they don't have the money, it's that they're not using it for that purpose. And by the way, in the NHS, that is always a good answer to people who tell you they haven't got the money. They've always got the money. They're spending it somewhere else. And you have a right to ask them why they think that's more important than your medicine. Yeah. I worked in the NHS long enough to know that that's a very pertinent question. So the key problem is willpower. Now, why are people not deploying their willpower to this? Well, I don't think it's to do with a failure to understand. I don't think anybody in healthcare in the world doesn't understand that people die from immune deficiencies and people suffer from immune deficiencies. Some of them even understand that immune deficiencies are very expensive in antibiotics and so on. But as far as I can tell, nobody has pulled all of this together into a coherent argument that is morally, scientifically, and economically sound. And I'm hoping that the work that we're now doing with the United Nations in this program that they have called Plasma for Life, I'm hoping that we can help them put together a really, really solid argument in favor of doing this in such a way that it's not a question of whether we can afford to. It's a question of whether we can afford not to.
Yeah, this isn't the case of taking plasma or plasma-derived medicines or treatments away from people in Europe or the UK or anywhere else and giving it to anyone else. Just making sure we have enough of it for everybody, and this is something that should be available to everybody. This is 30-year-old technology. We're not talking about something new here. That's this newfangled thing that's come along. IVIg's been around for 30 years. Why hasn't everyone got it? And that
well,
for
exactly,
me.
But when you ask a question like that, and it's so obvious, there's something wrong. I studied industrial psychology at the London School of Economics postgraduate work years ago. And we had a marvelous lecturer who said, look, when the symptoms are utterly trivial, the disease is really serious. There is no reason why you shouldn't collect more plasma. There's absolutely no technological obstacle to fractionating that plasma in India or in Africa or in South America. But somehow the world has got a stranglehold on this. The way I put it is this: when you go and look for titanium or some of these rare metals that the Chinese are now getting a real grip on, or you go and look for gold, you have to find the place where it is. Now, our raw material, luckily, the raw material needed for your immunoglobulin is the most plentiful thing in the world. It's as plentiful as raindrops and sunshine. Everybody in the earth, all 8 billion of us, has got, a good few 10 pints of it. So it's not a question of availability of raw material. There are those in the commercial sector who will tell you it's all far too complicated. They'll pat you on the head like little children. Oh, no, we'll just be doing that. Thank you. Because they make a lot of money out of it. It's one of the hugest export revenues from America.
Yeah.
America produces about 78% of what the world needs. And I think absorbs about 40% of that for themselves. But basically, India should be producing enough for itself.
Yeah.
The first thing, and so should Indonesia and Africa and South America. I mean, I've lived and worked in South America, and I know something about conditions there. That, again, is ready for development. A good plasmapheresis, absolutely no problem. We know how to do that. Fractionation, again, is, as you say, it's a well-known approach. But that's the first stranglehold. Nice export trade from America. Let's keep it all in the family. There are only 4 or 5 serious global players in this field. In most markets, that would be called a closed shop or a cartel, but it's just the way it is. I'm not blaming them. It's just the fact. They've been swallowing each other up. When I was a boy, there were about 12 of them. Now there's 5, and I don't know how long. It's like those games that the children play where something comes and eats things, But that's only point 1. And actually, Rich, I think after the basic willpower question, the next biggest reason why we're not making progress is the insistence by people like the WHO, the EU, the European Blood Alliance on utterly uncompensated plasma donation. It's a tremendous obstacle. And the reason for it is understandable. I'm not claiming that these are evil people. They were all brought up, as I was, in a world where if you collected enough whole blood, you had enough plasma to make everything you wanted. Red cells and factor VIII in those days were about equally in demand. If I collected enough whole blood in Scotland really well, with good additives and so forth, I could get everything I needed in factor VIII and other clotting factors, everything I needed in albumin and Ig, and I didn't need to do pheresis donation in any volume at all, only for hyperimmunes, for anti-D and hepatitis and zoster and rabies and so forth. We used to pherese the postman if they'd been bitten by a dog and they'd had anti-rabies. They were hotching with anti-rabies vaccine antibodies. But in those days, nobody had to collect large bulk volumes of pheresis plasma, and therefore there's a whole generation of people, particularly in Europe, who say, oh, no, you mustn't pay donors. Goodness gracious, no, my granny taught me that. Yeah, but that was in the days when whole blood was enough to do the whole job. I mean, we can still live perfectly well on whole blood donations from utterly unpaid donors because we have enough donors who are rich enough in time and money so they can do it and feel justifiably proud of it. But if you're talking to impoverished donors in Kenya or in the uplands of Indonesia, you can't expect them to walk to a donor session, spend a couple of hours, and walk back again and not get paid for it. It's just lunacy.
Yeah, a nice orange drink and a biscuit, and off your pot. I think that's one of the big global issues is how much we get and that's really country by country should be making those decisions about whether they make that. It shouldn't be an overwhelming thing. We've got the SOHO directives of the substances of human origin across Europe, which allows individual countries to make the decision about whether they pay or not, and then countries all turn it back and say, well, we can't because of our long-standing histories of altruism, which is a problem unto itself. I don't know the same for worldwide, but for the guys listening at home and for people who are impacted by inflammatory neuropathies here in the UK, what can they do to do this? Because it still feels like the global one's a global issue. Even the UK one, it feels big. To make sure we've got 23% of plasmas coming from UK plasma source at the minute, and around about that. Seems big. How do we fix this? What can people do about it?
I mean, I hesitate to be very pontifical about this. First of all, I know from personal experience that you and the patients you represent need more than you're already getting.
Yes.
You. And your carers and your clinicians know that. And before some guy from India preaches at you, my top advice is you just work on getting enough volume for you. But the second thing to say is that if you get enough volume for you from British donors' plasma, then you will no longer be sucking off plasma from the global supply. My argument to Europe is that, look, you're not free to do what you like. You are currently only surviving on plasma from America. About 40% of European supply comes from America. This depletes the global supply. And since the global supply is only 20% of what's needed, put it like this, 16% of what's needed in the world comes from the commercial sector, mostly from America, but also from Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Czechia. And increasingly now from Egypt, who is also paying their donors and working on it with Grifols. But that's still only 16% of need. And what is the public sector doing, the not-for-profit sector, the ones who love all this altruism? They are providing only 4% of what patients globally need. They should not be rejoicing and going to conferences to shout about themselves. They should be in shame, absolutely shameful. It may make some donors feel really virtuous that they don't accept the money. Well, they can give it to charity then. But for goodness sake, don't deny other donors the chance to get paid for it. The experience in America is very straightforward. In areas where there are plasma centers, the local economy improves. Debt goes down, destitution goes down, homelessness goes down. And the argument we get from people like the European Blood Alliance is, oh, isn't that shameful? Oh, these people, they're so poor, and you're exploiting them by giving them money. But now, if this was Monty Python's Flying Circus, that would be funny. But it's not funny, it's a shameful nonsense. They're poor because they're poor, and that is a shame. And it's a disgrace. It would be lovely if they weren't poor and hungry, but they are. And giving plasma helps them survive. It also helps others. You know, and people talk about substances of human origin. Well, when I give a pint of blood, it takes about 12 weeks to regrow all the contents, including the red cells. But I mean, it's 90% water anyway. You know, if I'm giving plasma, I regrow that faster than my toenails. I regrow it faster than my hair. You know, as far as a donor is concerned, there is no sacrifice except the time and effort and cost of doing it. But for the patient, it's a complete lifesaver. And yet the people in Brussels want to turn it into some kind of religious ceremony. Oh, donation is wonderful. Donation means nothing if it doesn't get to the patient, and they're not serving enough patients.
Yeah, if we don't meet need, we haven't done the job properly. That's as simple as that.
Exactly.
But in the meantime, while we can't pay people for it, I guess the message is, hey guys, if you can donate whole blood at your local donation centre or down the village hall or wherever is easiest for you, please go and do it. I mean, we've talked about, it'd be better if you got paid, but please go and donate anyway, because what an amazing thing you are doing, and you are saving lives, and we need more. We know that's the principal thing out of this. If you can get to one of those 3 plasma centres, hopefully 4 soon, so in Twickenham, in Reading, or in Birmingham, please go and give some plasma. That's great as well, because that goes all into the pot. But a fundamental change is needed in order how we collect and do it, so we can improve the numbers and more people are able to get these life-saving treatments that are absolutely essential, and stop being told they're expensive and super rare and that we're going to take you off them. Just make them mainstream. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, well, exactly. But again, but focusing very much on the individual patient. I mean, a lot of your patients will not be able to actually give themselves. They'll have to be advocates for it.
They will, yes.
And one of the things that upsets me about this whole scene is that there's an awful lot of kind of shouting at donors. Oh, you haven't given enough. It's not that they haven't given enough, it's that people aren't collecting enough. Now, if your members and other viewers want a challenge, then hey guys, why don't we try and make the UK the only country in the world that is self-sufficient on totally uncompensated plasma? I don't believe it's impossible. I think it's only possible in a rich middle-class country.
Yes.
But British values might make it. I mean, remember, we're talking about 4 times as much. Go to a donor session, look at those red cell donors, and imagine the room 4 times the size and full. That's what you need for plasma. It's a big challenge.
Mm.
But I don't say I am not an advocate for paying donors. I'm an advocate for doing what you need to do to help patients, right? And if you can do it without paying, well, wonderful. I'm a Scotsman. I love that. I get it for nothing. Wonderful, wonderful. But if you're advocating beyond these borders,
Yes.
and if you come across people in Brussels or Strasbourg or Luxembourg, the lobby that I'm trying to press is to say to those people, just tip your pyramid upside down instead of telling everybody downwards what they should do. Will you please just look at the scene on the ground, realize what's required, and as you quite rightly said earlier, Rich, give countries the freedom to do what they like locally. I mean, if they've got barriers to payment, religious or otherwise, then try and do it without paying. But once the body count goes up and you realize you're not winning, you may want to give them a little. Can I add another little point about Britain, though, Rich? Can I?
Okay.
I know I'm talking too much. I always do. The thing about Britain is interesting because there is have you heard of the organization We Donate?
Yes.
Yes. Now, Stephen and his team, his friends and partners have set up this extraordinary, wonderful thing, which when you've thought about it, it's obvious, but we haven't thought about it for 100 years. So you join a gang as a donor with your donor card, and you then become entitled to all sorts of lovely discounts. And I thought, well, this will be all right occasionally, a bit tuppence off the fish and chips. Not at all. Huge discounts on Nike and Marks and Spencer's and Holland and Barrett medicines. I mean, it's marvelous. And it isn't donor compensation as such, but it's a nice reward for your effort.
Absolutely. And that's our other tool, isn't it, that we have got, is what are those other things that we can do to kind of nudge people towards donating and making, it's great, if we can go. My son's brilliant. He goes off and donates all the time. He's just got a little badge actually sent to him in the post the other week. Incredible. And I was like, that's great, you've got a badge. But I'm sure he would rather have some money off his Greg's or whatever, and I think this is where we can look at doing things slightly differently under the restrictions that we have at the minute, where we can't give people cash, is that we could go, well, make it worth your while, maybe even pay for your parking. Heaven forfend.
Yes.
And I think some of those
absolutely.
kind of those extra little nudges and perks and rewards that we can give people, even if it's a discount from a company that can very easily afford it. We're talking Amazon here, let's face it. They can afford to give a little bit altruistically. Why don't they join in this and reward people for giving? And then everyone's a winner, apart from the tax of Amazon in this case. So I think there are other tools that we've got, and we really need to explore those in order to see, how we can boost it. I love that challenge. Can we make this country the only place that's completely 100% self-sufficient, in its plasma, in our patch?
Remember, it's what I think one football manager used to call a double whammy. It's a double whammy because you improve access to the medicines in the UK. And for every drop of medicine made from an extra drop of British plasma, there's a drop overseas that wasn't having to be imported.
Absolutely.
So there's a multiplier effect.
We stop using stuff we're bringing in. Someone else can have that. That's the thing. And we've been talking for a while. I'm sure people are loving every minute of it, but we will have to draw it to a close. I'm guessing. What's next for United Plasma Action then? What's your big things on your agenda?
Our next big program, and we've been working on this for over a year, is an alliance with the UN to help the Indian plasma situation. There's an organization called the United Nations Institute for Training and Research,
right?
Who run a thing called Plasma for Life. It's worth, actually, people who are interested, they should just Google that, Plasma for Life. There's a good website. And we believe we're soon going to be able to announce that that's being launched in India. It's not yet official. I don't know, when will this webcast actually go out?
It'll be around the Christmas time.
Okay, well, I mean, just so the audience knows, this isn't official yet. It may have been announced by Christmas, but there's no harm in them knowing. The United Nations has taken a particular interest in plasma. They understand the problems. They were operating Plasma for Life in Argentina and in Malaysia as sort of pilot examples of low and middle income countries. I've been working with them since last October to bring this to India because I think it gives a different dimension. And the Indian social challenges are greater even than Argentina, where they're big enough. But India's a bigger deal. So that's our focus. United Plasma Action is a small group of people. We try to make up in passion what we miss in numbers. But, you know, we're modest about how much we can achieve. But there was somebody years ago, some ancient Greek, I think, who said, give me a lever long enough and somewhere to pivot it, and I will shift the world for you. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I'm a great believer in the little grain of sand thing. The way I put it is we are not a reagent, we're a catalyst. And wherever we can, we catalyze action. We do not catalyze what the conference bulletins call exciting discussions. We want to catalyze actual action. And that means basically 4 times as much plasma globally as we currently have. It isn't a small challenge, it's enormous, but it's a challenge that is eminently achievable. You know, we've got all the technology, we've got the know-how, all we need is the willpower and a little bit more flexibility about donor encouragement.
Good way to do it. I'm a big believer in one person can change the world, and you know, you've just summed it up perfectly. One man can change the world because you have, and you are, and I think it's amazing. And I know you're doing it with lots of other people, but you've really changed the whole way that IG is being brought back into the UK. We've got the UK plasma back. That is down to you. It's an incredible thing to have done, and what a start. And thank you very much for joining us on here. Where can people follow you? LinkedIn's your main place, isn't it?
Well, I think at the moment LinkedIn is my main place. I mean, I'm sure people won't be in the least bit interested in following me.
Of course they will be. We will put David's LinkedIn in the show notes for this, so people can link to it.
Okay, let me add, I do try to be accessible. You know, I mean, I can't always help everybody, but I do try to be accessible because one of my great benefits, I mean, I'm so lucky. I've got a really good network of experts. So if people have got problems that seem to be a little bit intractable, you know, I have got access to people who can help. So I'm not ruling out getting involved. All I'm saying is I'm probably not going to be as relevant as you are. You work closely with these people.
I do, but if people want to kind of see what's going on in the world of worldwide plasma, I strongly recommend a follow to David's LinkedIn, because you'll be able to see exactly what he's up to, everything he's commenting on, and he's pretty busy on there sharing, and you know, you can benefit from just reading those things that I do. Give him a little like and keep that encouragement up, because we really need people like David out there fighting our corner and changing the world for the better. So more power to your arm, young man. And thank you again for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure and a joy to talk to you.
Thank you, Rich, and thank you for all that you do for patients. Keep it up.
You've just listened to an episode of In All Honesty, a podcast made by Inflammatory Neuropathies UK. It was presented by me, Rich Collins, and was produced by Chris Morton. To find out about what we're up to at Inflammatory Neuropathies UK, head over to www.inflammatorineuropathies.uk or check out our socials at InflamNeuro UK. That's at INFLAMNEURO UK.